In this fourth issue, we will discuss the mechanism for receiving an item once every day. GS2 limit is a GS2 microservice for limiting the number of times an item can be received, and GS2 exchange is a microservice for exchanging items. In this article, I would like to explain these two services and create a mechanism to receive an item once a day. First, we will explain the data structures of GS2 limit and GS2 exchange. First, we will explain the structure of GS2 limit. The general structure is the same as that of GS2 inventory. Underneath the namespace are master data and user data. Under the master data, there are multiple limit models. The limit model is data that indicates the type of limit and can be used to set the timing for resetting the counter. Under the user data, there are counters. The counter keeps track of how many actions have currently been performed, and the counter value is reset based on the associated limit model. Since GS2 exchange will also be used this time, the data structure of GS2 exchange will also be explained. GS2 exchange has a rate model. The rate model records the exchange rate. In this case, we will prepare an exchange rate that allows the user to obtain 1 potion in exchange for increasing the counter with a maximum value of 1. Let's check the typical APIs of GS2 limit and GS2 exchange. Typical API for GS2 limit. As with the description of GS2 inventory, we have listed the APIs that are safe on the left side and the APIs that lead to fraud on the right side. Typical API for GS2 exchange. This presentation describes GS2's transaction system, stamp sheets. In this demonstration, a stamp sheet is issued when the exchange function of GS2 exchange is called. The stamp sheet contains information on compensation and rewards, and each system is equipped with a mechanism to receive the stamp sheet and perform the processing specified in the stamp sheet. The stamp sheet is structured like this. The root layer of the stamp sheet contains the payload and signature, so that the payload cannot be forged. Within the payload is a list of consumption actions that represent consideration and acquisition actions that represent rewards. In the case of this implementation, the consume action records raising the counter of GS2 limit by 1, and the acquire action creates a stamp sheet that records obtaining 1 potion in GS2 inventory. When this stamp sheet is sent to GS2 limit, the counter can be manipulated and potions can be obtained. However, there is a condition that the consume actions must be executed first, and the acquire action must be executed after all the consume actions have been completed. An API that accepts an acquire action will respond with an error if all consume actions in the stamp sheet have not been executed. The purpose of this is to prevent fraud. Let's take a look at the stamp sheet execution process. First, the game player calls the exchange API at GS2 exchange. A stamp sheet is then issued. At this stage, since the stamp sheet has not yet been executed, neither the counter value nor the quantity of items in the player's possession has changed. The received stamp sheet is then passed to GS2 distributor. GS2 distributor then checks the contents of the stamp sheet, transfers the process to the appropriate microservice, and executes the process described on the stamp sheet. At this time, if a GS2 limit or GS2 inventory microservice fails, the process will be interrupted. If an error response is received from GS2 distributor, it is necessary to perform retry processing for GS2 distributor. The processes recorded on the stamp sheet are implemented in such a way that they are not duplicated and are designed so that repeated execution of the stamp sheet does not cause the count limit counter to go up too high, nor does it result in the acquisition of too many items. The problem at this point is that there are many things to consider in order to retry. For example, the problem arises if the application shuts down immediately after sending the stamp sheet to GS2 distributor. If there had been an error, you would have to retry, but since the application has shut down, the stamp sheet information is nowhere to be found. To prevent such an accident, it was necessary to save the stamp sheet as saved data before execution and implement a way to delete it from the saved data when the process is finished. The added feature is the stamp sheet auto-execute function. When the auto-execute stamp sheet feature is enabled in the GS2 exchange namespace settings, the GS2 exchange return value changes to a transaction ID instead of a stamp sheet. Setting the transaction ID to GS2 distributor to get the status will tell you if the stamp sheet has been executed. As it is difficult to know when the execution of the stamp sheet is finished, which makes it difficult to use. This is where GS2 Gateway comes in, which provides a mechanism to receive push notifications from the server. GS2 distributor asks GS2 gateway to send out push notifications when processing is complete. This concludes our study of frequency limits and exchange in GS2. Now, let's actually write some code to use the GS2 limit and GS2 exchange functions. So far, we have created resources in the management console, checked their operation, and finally prepared templates. From now on, let's proceed with the implementation while describing the template from the beginning. First, create a GS2 distributor namespace with the name distributor. Since the GS2 key encryption key is also required to issue stamp sheets, create the encryption key. Create a namespace for GS2 limit named limit. Next, set the master data. This time, we will create a limit model named daily that will be reset every day at 0:00 JST. The time must be specified in UTC, Coordinated Universal Time. Since Japan Standard Time is plus 9 hours ahead of UTC, you will need to specify 15 o'clock if you want to reset at midnight. Continue by setting the GS2 exchange namespace to exchange. In the namespace of the service that issues the stamp sheet, there is a transaction setting item. Set Enable Loader Run to false and specify the ID of the encryption key you just created in KAID. Finally, set the master data for GS2 exchange. The exchange rate must be set. Set the exchange rate as daily rewards. Set the consideration in consuming actions. In this case, we want to set the consuming action to increase by 1 the counter of the maximum number of times, limit of 1. Go to the GS2 documentation page and open the page that lists the possible consume actions for stamp sheets. Follow the instructions in the document to set a consolation to increase the counter of the GS2 limit. Continue with the reward settings. Rewards are set in Acquire Reactions. Open the list page of rewards that can be set on the stamp sheet. Set the reward to acquire a potion, according to the rewards for acquiring items in GS2 inventory. Now you can redeem daily rewards in GS2 Exchange to get one potion once a day. Finally, deploy the template you created. There were a few mistakes, but the deployment is complete. Now we can go into implementation. Now let's actually write the code. First, set the GS2 distributor namespace in the GS2 client initialization process. Now, when a stamp sheet is issued as a result of an API call, the stamp sheet will be executed using the specified GS2 distributor. The contents of GS2 inventory and the contents of the counter in GS2 limit are output. Continue with the GS2 exchange to replace the daily rewards. Finally, output the contents of GS2 inventory and the contents of the counter in GS2 limit again. This completes the implementation. Let's execute it. The value of the counter is set to 1 and we have obtained 1 potion. Let's run it again. Since the counter has reached its maximum value, the exchange process did not succeed and an exception occurred. The count limit is functioning correctly. Preview of next article. Let's add a UI to the program we created this time. GS2 SDK has a component called UI Kit that makes it easy to create a UI. Please look forward to the next time.